The United States is undeniably one of the most influential nations in modern history. With over 18 military bases around the world and an economy exceeding $5 trillion, it shapes global politics, culture, and trade. The US market accounts for 15% of global consumption. So how did the United States evolve from a small cluster of colonial territories to its current level of power? The birth of the United States was rooted in an idea that was revolutionary in an era dominated by absolute monarchy. The Declaration of Independence, issued in 1776, not only marked America's break from British rule but also established fundamental principles, such as the inalienable rights of individual liberty. After independence, the young nation faced tremendous challenges, creating an effective government, expanding its territorial reach, and safeguarding its sovereignty. Yet it was precisely these challenges that forged the United States into a country defined by resilience and ambition. In the 19th century, the United States embarked on an unprecedented expansion. The ideology of manifest destiny drove the nation from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific. This territorial growth was not merely geographical, it was strategically vital. The US gained vast natural resources, including coal, oil, and fertile farmland. However, this expansion came at a heavy cost. The forced displacement of indigenous peoples and territorial conflicts left deep marks on history. Even so, the new territorial framework laid a solid foundation for America's economic development. The greatest test of American resilience came with the Civil War. This conflict not only preserved national unity, but also abolished slavery, allowing the country to redefine itself both morally and economically. By the end of the 19th century, the United States was no longer a loose alliance of independent states. It had grown into a continental power with global aspirations, setting the stage for its later emergence as a superpower. At the same time, the United States ignited the Industrial Revolution, which transformed the nation's landscape. Between 1870 and 1900, technological advances and the exploitation of natural resources propelled the US to the top of the global economy. One of the core pillars of this transformation was the steel industry. Steel became the key material for building railroads, bridges, and skyscrapers, symbolizing urban growth and national connectivity. Meanwhile, oil and coal became the driving energy sources of the new economy. Leading these economic changes were figures like Rockefeller and Morgan. Rockefeller monopolized the oil industry, while Morgan consolidated the American banking system. These entrepreneurs, often called robber barons, amassed enormous wealth and, in the process, shaped the economic future of the United States. Another critical factor was mass immigration. Millions of Europeans came to America seeking opportunity, forming the backbone of the industrial workforce. They participated in building cities, operating factories, and expanding infrastructure, propelling the country into an era of urbanization, a process that brought both opportunities and challenges. New inventions like the telephone and electricity revolutionized daily life, but problems such as overcrowded cities and poor working conditions also emerged. Despite the difficulties, by 1900 the United States had cemented its status as the world's largest economy. With a strong domestic market, advanced technology, and abundant resources, it was ready to play a central role in global affairs. When World War I broke out under President Wilson, the US adopted a neutral stance. At the time, America was focused on domestic development and avoided overseas entanglements. But that neutrality did not last long. The US was already deeply tied to Europe through economic links, exporting vast amounts of goods to allies like Britain and France. However, Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare put America's neutral position in jeopardy. In April 1960, the United States formally declared war on Germany and entered the conflict. Millions of American soldiers crossed the Atlantic to the European front. The American involvement proved to be a turning point. The European forces, exhausted after years of war, were revitalized by America's fresh energy, ample resources, and rising military power. After the armistice in 1918, the United States played a key role in the peace negotiations. President Wilson put forward his 14 points, an ambitious plan to rebuild the post-war order and prevent future conflicts. Although many of his ideas were not fully implemented with American support, the League of Nations, the precursor to the United Nations, was established. World War I marked America's full transformation into a global power. Although the U.S. later returned to isolationism, its economic influence and cultural soft power had grown tremendously, laying the groundwork for an even more significant global role. The 1920s were a period of economic prosperity and optimism in the United States, known as the Roaring Twenties. This era was characterized by technological progress, mass consumption, and seemingly unstoppable economic growth. But beneath the surface lay a fragile financial system supported by excessive speculation and uncontrolled credit. The stock market crash in New York in 1929 shattered the illusion of prosperity. The resulting crisis, known as the Great Depression, plunged the United States and much of the world into unprecedented economic hardship. Businesses collapsed, millions lost their jobs, banks closed, and countless families fell into despair. As the crisis swept the nation, President Hoover was widely criticized for his inadequate response, paving the way for Franklin D. Roosevelt's rise to power. In 1933, Roosevelt took office, promising a New Deal for the American people. The New Deal was a series of programs and reforms aimed at revitalizing the economy and restoring public confidence. Large-scale infrastructure projects, such as the Hoover Dam, not only created jobs but also modernized the country. Financial reforms and the creation of a social security system provided stability and security for citizens. At the same time, the crisis forced the United States to reevaluate its global position. As totalitarian regimes rose in Europe and Asia, Americans increasingly realized that their economic and political security was tied to the global balance of power. The outbreak of World War II once again plunged the world into conflict. Initially, the United States remained neutral, but through the Lend-Lease Act it provided critical support to allies such as Britain and the Soviet Union. That neutrality was shattered on December 7, 1941, when Japan launched a surprise attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. The attack shocked the nation, and the United States immediately declared war on Japan, followed by declarations on Germany and Italy. The U.S. rapidly mobilized its economy and its people for war. Millions of Americans enlisted, and American factories began producing weapons, aircraft, and ships on an astonishing scale. American forces played a crucial role in both the Pacific and European theaters. In the Pacific, the Battle of Midway in 1941 marked a turning point, forcing Japan onto the defensive. In Europe, the D-Day landings in 1940 signaled the beginning of the end for the Nazi regime. At the end of the war, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, forcing Japan's surrender in 1940. World War II not only established the United States as the world's leading military power, but also solidified its core influence in economic and diplomatic affairs. After the war, the U.S. became one of the principal architects of the New World Order, helping to create key international institutions such as the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. After World War II, the United States found itself in an unprecedented strategic position, the largest economy, the foremost military power, and the sole possessor of nuclear weapons. But new challenges soon arose. The Soviet-led bloc stood in direct opposition to the American-led bloc, marking the beginning of the Cold War. The Cold War was not a direct military confrontation between the two superpowers, but rather a contest for global influence through proxy conflicts, technological competition, and economic rivalry. To counter the Soviet threat, the US introduced the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan, strengthening strategic allies such as Britain, France, and West Germany. At the same time, America joined military alliances like NATO and invested heavily in technological innovation to maintain its edge. The space race was a hallmark of Cold War rivalry. After the Soviet launch of Sputnik, the US responded with the Apollo program, showcasing fierce competition in science and technology. In the 1980s, the Cold War entered a critical phase. President Reagan adopted a tough stance toward the Soviet Union, which became one of the factors contributing to the eventual collapse of the USSR. After the Cold War ended, the United States emerged as the world's sole superpower, further consolidating its leadership in the international system and global capitalism. In the decades that followed, the United States led a profound technological revolution that not only reshaped its own economy, but also changed the lives of billions of people worldwide. Silicon Valley became the global hub of innovation, giving rise to tech giants like Microsoft, Apple, Google, and Facebook. The digital platforms built by these companies connected individuals, businesses, and governments in unprecedented ways. At the same time, the United States maintained its position as the world's economic leader, with a GDP exceeding $5 trillion. The US dollar serves as the global reserve currency, giving America unique advantages in the international financial system. In the military realm, the US continued to expand its global footprint, maintaining over 8 military bases worldwide and investing in advanced defense technologies such as drones and artificial intelligence. These capabilities ensure that the United States remains the world's foremost military power. America's journey from colonial outpost to the most powerful superpower in history is unparalleled. Even as the future presents new challenges, its global influence remains impossible to ignore.